What's going on, everyone? It's Chris from 416 Coffee, and this is the first episode of Beans in Business. And I'm here with the lovely Jeremy Panda of Peace and Cotton, which is how would you describe your business?
I guess we're a carte blanche customizing company. So we pride ourselves on being able to print on anything. We specialize in apparel, but we print on all sorts of stuff. We make stuff, and we just anything that has to do with sort of printing or customization, the specialty stuff and apparel. That's kind of what we do.
You guys have a big experiential side of your business as well, right?
Yeah, it was growing. It was about 20% of the company and growing, doing our manufacturing and printing live for like Adidas. We've done 90 events for Adidas around North America. And that was a huge part. I mean, it'll come back, but you kind of have to just assume that it's dead for now.
For the time being,
Kill it, and it'll come back eventually.
Well, anyways, Jeremy, let's start by, so the point of this podcast, the point of like Beans in Business, we are supposed to be drinking coffee with this, but me and Jeremy are running a little late tonight, so we're doing some double oaked Woodford Reserve, which I think we're going to talk about a little later. But the point of this is to kind of guide people on their entrepreneurial journey. I think there's a need for people to hear from small business founders, like kind of the 0 to 50 million in revenue type businesses. And there's a lot of podcasts that service the tech giants, the guys that are doing, the Bezoses of the world, if you will. But I don't think there's a lot that talk to guys running smaller businesses that, like I said, 0 to 50 million in revenue, that kind of frame. So why don't you start by telling everyone a bit about your story, like how you got here, how did it start?
Cool. So I've been, I haven't had an employer for, since I was maybe 18 or 19 years old. I've been going for about 20 years now. I'm 40 this year. So Peace and Cotton is basically the amalgamation of a number of years of doing a lot of crazy things and trying a whole lot of things and messing up a whole lot. So right now, we'll start really quick with a little snapshot. Right now, we have a 9,000 square foot factory in Toronto. We have 8 full-timers, and then we bring in temps to do different types of jobs. And things are going well, and we can talk about that more later. Where it started in Moncton, New Brunswick. I guess officially, there was a lot of reasons why I found myself out there, but basically it was in the world of kiosks. So I have a lot of different sort of skill sets other than reading books. One of them was I used to play kind of professional pool.
Wait, actually?
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah, so pool. So I don't know where you start, but my father bought us a snooker table when I was 7, and so I was playing snooker at 7, 8, 9. Didn't know I was kind of raised in a bit of a bubble. My father is a retired nuclear physicist, and just assumed that his 2 sons would be academics, and he got one, but the other one, me, didn't go that route. But pool was a big thing. So when I went to university, went to York. When I was 18, I found myself playing, with these guys from Toronto and beating them because I had played since I was 7 or 8. And so that was pretty amazing to just sort of pop out into the world. The bubble was broken and I was ready to live my life pretty freely. And that was one of the things that I did. So I was a bartender and I used to play pool a lot with all these guys and, win drinks. And when we used to go to clubs in Toronto and university, I used to just stand by the pool table and just keep the pool table for the whole night and buy drinks for everybody. And I've definitely won quite a bit of money playing, and I've lost some money too. Been to the Nationals doing that, 9-ball, 8-ball. But yeah, pool was one of them. That's one of the things. But I met this guy who was, this crazy guy who owned 86 kiosks across Canada. And he tried to hire somebody to help him with his business because they were scaling. And he tried to hire, I think, 5 other people before me. I was the worst waiter. I was a good bartender, but I was the worst waiter. I was 2-hand Panda, spilling drinks. I can remember it slow motion every person I've spilled drinks on. And there was a lot of them. 2 hands walking up. I'd have this little chin strap beard that they tried to get me to shave off. And I'd be like, yeah, no problem. And, just kind of working away there, breaking corks, opening wine. It was the worst. I was the worst waiter. But they tried to fire me several times, but I was, the associates didn't let that happen. So anyway, this guy owned these kiosks, and he finally asked all these people to work for him. They all said no. And that was kind of how I was hired in to be his lackey. Now, something that I've always been good at is taking the worst out of something and turning it into something that was that was framed in a much more positive, bigger, optimistic kind of way. So I turned my kind of lackey title, general warehouse skid helper of this guy, to general manager. So I was now the general manager of this company, and that was kind of my crash course. One thing that was really important there was he was completely insane, and he was pretty aggressive and violent towards a lot of people, not towards me, but he was not a great person. And my girlfriend at the time, who was 13 years my senior,
holy shit,
I remember we drank a lot of wine, and I remember sitting in her apartment and saying, I think I'm going to quit. And she's like, you're an idiot. She said, basically, you got to take in life as a sponge. And she said, do a year. And you're going to do 1 year. It's going to hurt everything, no matter what, though. Absolutely no matter what, unless you get fired, you're staying. Like, you're not going to sulk. You're not going to whine. You're not going to quit. And at the end of that year, you're going to learn something from it. This was a major, major point in my life that keeps coming back to me over the years.
Did you need someone to do that to you at that time?
I did.
You needed to stick with something.
I think so. The problem with my parents, who I love, is that they really, love was over everything. And it wasn't necessarily about learning the right way to work and to stick to something. And I think that was because of my dad with the academic background. He didn't really know what to do with me. And then my mom just loves me. And she just, I remember my first job was working at an apple orchard across the street. And we were supposed to move loose branches out of the middle of the trees and put them in the middle of the orchard. It was a huge orchard in Chudley's apple orchard. And
I actually raced with the son of that guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I raced against, his name was Luke. Yeah, that's
how. Oh, no way.
It was
I got stories there too, but I terrorized them a bit. But and I remember just thinking, oh, I don't like this. I was like 12 years old. I walked across the street, told my mom, and she said, no worries, go to bed, lie down, watch TV, whatever. I'm like, cool. This is the perfect time for her to have said, no, you got to go back. You got to learn. You got to work. You got to work hard. Didn't happen.
Are you the younger brother?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were coddled?
It was just completely different. My brother, I think what happened was my dad, and we talk about this openly now, or I do, and they listen. But my dad would sort of say, he got perfect in everything. It wasn't necessarily to be arrogant or gloat. It was just a fact. My dad got perfect in everything. He was a Oxford scholar, and did multiple degrees on his way to getting his nuclear physics PhD. But it was just he just got perfect. And my brother, I think, being the oldest, he just sort of followed in that footstep, and he had nothing to rebel against because he was the first. And I came through and thought, why would I do the same thing? And it didn't come as easy to me. So I went the complete opposite. But I mean, we were coddled. Sure, I think we all were a little bit. I think it was about love and about my parents were first generation, and they both my dad came from India, my mom came from England, and I think they just wanted us to be good, and they both worked. So there wasn't a lot of time to think about things. My wife and I have so much time to think. I mean, we're both working, but I think we've built lives where we have a bit of flexibility with our thought and thinking with our kids and stuff, and that's kind of cool. But I don't know if there was a lot of time for them to just sit around when they were raising us and talk about this kind of thing, whereas, we try to.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, so let's jump back on the path. So you're in kiosk world. You're drinking wine with the girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
She says you got to do a year.
Yeah. So I did 1 year and I quit at a year. Like
to
walked
the day.
in and said, I'm going. So another skill was music. So I was in jazz performance at York in trumpet and keyboards. And, you know, I used to sing a lot and play in bands and had some music going to Degrassi and have written like TV theme songs and done a lot of music stuff. Played on maybe 30, 40 records. It was what I was told I maybe should have done, but we'll talk about that. But it wasn't the route that I wanted to go to be a rock star. It was for a while. But anyway, I told my boss at the time, I said, I quit and I'm going to go to India because I want to go to see where my dad's from. And I want to play music and be a hippie. And he said, you're an idiot. You're good at this. You know, you've learned, you've gotten a crash course in this business. Why don't you go to the East Coast and start, like, have a couple kiosks. You can buy these sunglasses. There were sunglass kiosks. You can buy the sunglasses from me, and you can start your business, and you can be independent, and you'll be fine. So he said, take a couple days and let me know. I went into my office, which is, you know, right next door, sat there, came back in a minute later and said, I'm going. I'm doing it. Went back to my roommate that night, told him that what was on the table. He was going on about all this advice. You know, I'm not listening. At the end of it, yeah, I'm going. You know, so I took off and I went to Moncton and had a couple kiosks and expanded the business out there a bit and made some pretty good dough, but didn't know. It's one of the first lessons was didn't realize how good I had it because I just hadn't had any experience. So it was a 2-bedroom condo, like a little condo in Moncton, pretty inexpensive, but you get a lot for, you know, $500-$600 a month. And I had money, I had cash that I was just sticking in the closet, like $2,000 to $5,000 cash, like weekly, putting them in. And I was just like, oh, I guess this is what it's like to have a business. This is it. So I remember traveling back to Toronto with like $10,000 cash or something in my thing. And the guy, they're like, you know, they see this cash and they're like, how much cash is there? I'm like, oh, about $11,000, $10,000. And they took me into this room and they sat me down and we went through this stuff. So I basically started from absolute zero because my parents were not business people. And I just, you know, since I was 20 or whatever, I just sort of learned from scratch. Like I remember working for that guy and someone saying, you know, handle the AR or handle the AP or whatever. And I was like, yeah, okay. No idea. You didn't have Google at the time. Like I couldn't it didn't seem as readily available then that I could just type in AP and say, what is AP? Oh, it's accounts payable. Oh, AR, it's accounts receivable. Like I was learning from scratch. And yeah, that's just sort of the way it started. And it was wild.
Man, that happens a lot. I remember when I started doing like digital marketing and selling websites and stuff when I was like probably like 20 at the time. It was the same thing that you're saying, like when you don't know how good you have it. Like I was just living at home, but same deal. You're making like, you know, $2,000 to $5,000 a month with no expenses, and you're like, oh, this is pretty good. And you're like, this just must be how you like sell a service. Like it's pretty straightforward. And then you do something more complex and you go down the rabbit hole, or you lose it all, right? Something
yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, you lose it, and I'm really glad. You know, my stepson is 12, and you could just tell he's very similar to how I was at that age, and he seems to be going down this route, and I don't want him to, where he's the class clown, and it's a harder route, you know, where you can see him starting to struggle, and he's being labeled an individual, which is encouraged in our household, but is discouraged sometimes in school, especially in COVID. And I just told him it's a world of pain. So I'm 40 and I love it and I don't regret a minute of it. And every error and mistake is embraced. But it's a long road, man. And you're 12. So you could make your life, you can be smarter than I was. Like I'm the subjective third party in your life. Listen to me. I didn't have this, you know, but you do whatever you want and I'll support it.
When you say world of pain, you mean being cutting your own, like kind of carving your own path in the world.
Yeah, like just mistake after mistake after mistake, like near bankruptcies. I went down once, not complete to zero, but close enough. Yeah, you go through it, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think at least entrepreneurship, we're talking about this narrow facet of like carving your own way. It's kind of glamorized right now and we have this, I believe we have kind of a success bias where only these successful stories are what we hear about. Where it's like most people fail. Yeah, most people it's completely awful. It like ruins relationships. It ruins lives. It sets people back. So there's a lot of challenges, and you have to accept kind of those risks going into it. But I think a lot of people get caught up with the positives, like, oh, I'm going to have my own business. I'm going to have freedom. I'm going to be able to make a lot of money. They think, these are the initial things to get people to start, when really it's like, I don't know. I don't think you should be an entrepreneur unless it's literally you're incapable of working for other people, which is how I always describe it.
Which is me. Yeah. I worked at every fast food place, every pizza place, I worked every job, landscaping, everything, every job, construction. Was fired a bunch of times, quit a bunch of times. I'd love quitting. I'd write letters, long letters, dramatic letters about how my life didn't depend on it. I remember I worked at Wendy's and I was demoted. I was doing the burgers, but I was horrible. So they demoted me to like a janitor. And we used to nap in the closet. This guy, Pete, buddy, we'd take turns just sort of sitting in this closet. And I remember I used to smoke a couple cigarettes here and there then. And I remember this guy, Mike, the manager, said, can you go out and scrape the drive-through, the gum off the drive-through cement pavement, right, of the drive-through? And I'm like, sure, no problem. So I went out, they had to give us like a scraper, looked at the gum, looked in the window, put it down, sat on the curb and just stared down everybody that drove by to the drive-through and just smoked cigarettes, staring into the Wendy's, like looking for Mike to just make eye contact with me. Like, I'm not touching this thing. I think I quit the next day. But I don't know. I'm obsessed with people. I love people. I love different types of people. I love learning about them and manners. I'm obsessed by it. I'm obsessed with the way that people work and are. I mean, that's part of it anyway.
I agree with that. I feel very similar. Like, people are fascinating, and it's like, yeah, everyone's different. Everyone has their own like little quirks, and I mean, it sounds cliche to say everyone's different. Everyone says that, but no, there is like a fascination with people, mannerisms, why people, even how people think, I find is interesting. I've become fascinated with like limiting beliefs, like how people just have like shit belief systems that impose like limits on them that don't exist, but they've imposed these limits on them,
right,
with their belief systems. So that's been my newest like fascination as far as like teasing them out of people.
Right.
But sorry, so let's get back on track. You show up in Toronto, you got 12 grand cash, you're in a small room getting interrogated because they think you're Pablo Escobar.
Yep.
Now what?
Nothing much happened. I remember it was a little bit weird. They didn't really know what to do. I didn't really know what to do. I think the RCMP called a couple people over the couple weeks because I'd get calls from the leasing manager in Moncton or whatever, and people just sort of saying, I just got a call from the RCMP or whatever. Is there anything I should worry about? I'm like, nah, I think it's because I brought a bunch of cash over and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, yeah, I came back though. There was a buddy of mine who had a store in Guelph where it was like this skate brand store, and then he also did some embroidery and some screen printing, like brokering from there. And I just remember seeing that from Moncton, and we were buds. And I was like, I think I could do that. I'm going to partner up with a screen printer in Toronto, open a store, and figure that out. It just seemed like, I didn't think a lot about things. It just seemed like, okay, it's a two-part business. You have a retail store. You rely on the retail, but you have a service element too. It seemed like he was figuring some stuff out. And so that was the motivation. And then I found a screen printer by just talking to people, and we opened up a store on College Street in Little Italy. And that's kind of where I really started to find out a lot about myself. Yeah. So I guess there's a lot of things that happened there, but one of them was after about a year, I had a partner who was just, I couldn't deal with. And so I came and I wanted to close the kiosk.
Why couldn't you deal with them?
He was an urban planner and had worked for the city for years and would just over intellectualize everything. So I didn't run any screen printing sales at the time, which is ironic. And I was sort of like in charge of the retail. So I remember him saying that he wanted to tell everybody in the invoice, in the quote, if you bought t-shirts off of us, he wanted to have in that invoice our hydro cost, our electrical cost, the film cost, frame cost, emulsion cost, ink cost, squeegee cost, everything built in so that you could see and consider us and understand the full extent of how amazing screen printing t-shirts was for you.
And you had to tell him that no one gives a shit.
I was like, this is ridiculous. And I remember, like, always, even to this day, I always try to oversimplify estimates, even if it's a massive quote for a massive corporation. I just simplify, because why would you care? I mean, we can go into that, and I can get into micro, but it to me was not intelligent. And him and I clashed a lot. And so I wanted to close the kiosk down. So I just came to him and said, listen, here's the deal. It's either you keep the store and I'm gone, or I'll take the store and we'll figure out the buyout or whatever. But we're done. I got to close my kiosk. I got to focus on this. I got to focus on something in Toronto. So he took a couple days and he said, I'm going to go back to the city. So I had this store, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but that's kind of, I was good at spreadsheets. When your father's a nuclear physicist and you kind of went through and got like a C average, or just enough to get into the university like York, it was a 72 average. I think I got a 72. There's just things that you get, like little gifts from having your dad with a mind like that. So math kind of came kind of naturally. I don't know if I really loved it. I like practical math. So business, it's great. But spreadsheets just came really easy. I could just sort of figure them out. And so all of a sudden I could just sort of work numbers out. And I started selling screen printing just because we had the sign still up on the wall after he left, my old partner, because he was a screen printer. And we had an A-frame out front, and I used to write specials on it and salesy stuff. And then I stopped. I'm a little eccentric. So I started putting kind of random comic quotes and stuff like that. And then thoughts. And this is before everybody else was doing it. Everybody does that now.
I was going to say, you set a trend there. You set a trend.
I mean, so I remember one thing that I did was there was this big tree there next to the frame. And I put this tree free in brackets, you remove. It was a joke. And I remember coming out and seeing this guy scratching his head and trying to figure out a way to get this tree. It was like a tree in Toronto. It was like, 40 feet. But it was funny. And I remember the neighborhood. This was a big thing for me. The neighborhood, I was engaging with them. And I had run all these kiosks around Eastern Canada for a year or whatever. And it was I hated malls. I hate malls. And it was very impersonal because I was just setting it up and managing it from afar. I wasn't really sitting there on ground level, right? Like a 4 and 6 coffee. All of a sudden it was Article 8. That was the name of the store. And it was me, and I was the owner operator, and it was working. And so that was kind of where I began. I sold screen printing and clothing out of it.
So you're on College Street, you're screen printing shirts. And what was it called?
Article 8.
Article 8, you're rolling. I know this only from our personal interactions, but I know you have a wild relationship story that might be able to serve some people out there. So tell the people. Yeah,
so I had a Grand Prix for some reason. I don't know why, but I had this red Grand Prix. When I first came back from the East Coast, I got a job as a courier. And the girlfriend, who was 13 years older, was like, what the hell are you doing? And I called myself like Car 66 or something. And I go around, and I was driving this Grand Prix. Everyone drives like Camrys or Civics because they're good on gas. I was driving a Grand Prix. I was maybe losing $3 a day doing that, but it was fun. I mean, I was watching 24 and doing push-ups and drinking whiskey, and I was a courier, and I had these kiosks in the East Coast. Anyway, so now I'm College Street. I think I've gotten rid of the kiosks at this point. I'm sitting there. So I had a bit of an obsession with some things going on at that store. But where do we start? We'll tell that story. So I was in another relationship. So this was another relationship. So it must have been a year or two after. and it was tumultuous. And I had an apartment in the East End for some reason. Didn't make any sense. But I was also playing in a lot of bands at the time. And I remember that the girlfriend at the time had said, you know, you're just a complete nightmare. You're all over the place. Can't hold you down kind of thing. You know, this is probably not going to go anywhere. And I saw it in her eyes that really it was trust. And so I thought, well, we should move in together. And she was like, what? You're not ready for that, you know? And I was like, no, I can do that. Let's do that. Let's move in together. So all of a sudden, we're moving in together. So I remember I got rid of my apartment and I was moving everything over to her apartment. And everything was kind of at my store in the basement. And I remember I think it was me, myself, and Irene. We were watching this movie, and I'm sitting there, and I look over, and she's bawling her eyes out.
Uh-oh.
At this comedy. And I remember thinking, yeah, this isn't good. This isn't a good situation. This is like the first night I'm moving in. My girlfriend's crying.
Night one.
This is like we're going back. Yeah, I think I would have stayed there that night and then started moving things in the morning.
Oh, Jesus.
So she's crying her eyes out, and I'm thinking, okay. And so I remember walking up to the door, and she's going a little slowly, and she goes to the door, and she just turns around. She's upset, and she's like, this isn't going to work. And I'm like, totally. It's not going to work. I see it. I can see it. No problem. See you later. And that started me living in the basement of my store for a while with this Grand Prix parked like
on
the street.
Yeah.
And there was these two, it was next to the Sicilian Sidewalk Cafe. And these guys, they were awesome. They knew that I was living there for sure. Because they'd be smoking cigarettes. And I'd be like just coming in at 11 o'clock or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just going to go do some work. And they're like, oh, yeah, do some work. And, but it was a weird place because it was all like the restaurant area in Toronto. So the basement was actually like rats would go back and forth a lot.
Jesus.
And I remember there was a fly, there was a fly infestation one week. Okay. Here's another little story. Maybe you don't want to include it. So I'm on a date or something. And I buy these fly trap things. I don't know, but when you
bought these on a date?
No. So I had bought these fly traps and I get obsessed about solving issues, and this was an issue. There was flies in the basement, and I was upset.
You're gonna solve it.
So I buy these fly catchers, and I put up like all in the rafters, like these fly sheets, right? And I'm at this date, and I'm sitting there, and all I'm thinking about is just. I'm so stoked to get these flies. Like the whole time, I'm just like, yeah, the flies. And so we're having this date, and I'm like, okay, see you later. And I remember going back, and it was just, we got them. We dealt with it. So I don't know how that story factors in, but it was a weird time. I used to sort of sleep. I remember I was sleeping in the change room at one point because it was kind of warm, and it wasn't the basement, and it was weird. I mean, I slept in my store, and my pride, like I had a car, so I could have driven to my parents' house 40 minutes away, but my pride, I couldn't let myself do it.
How old are you at this time, just to put it in perspective?
I think I'm, God, there's a lot that's happened in the last 15 years. I think I was mid-20s.
So let's call it 25.
Yeah, okay. But there was a big financial problem at the time. I was definitely, I had some debt, I think, from the kiosk closing and assets that I couldn't really turn into anything. And, right around that time was when I kind of went down.
So So you're 25, you're in debt. You tried moving in with a girl, and that lasted 12 hours.
Yeah.
And now you're living in the rat-infested basement, College Street.
Yeah.
And the Sicilian Cafe guys know 100% you're living in there, and you got the Grand Prix. You're in some debt.
A nice car, but nothing else. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the.
Parents have no idea this is happening.
This is the pit of sorrow.
I guess so, but I could tell it was part of a journey. And it was a little weird.
Did you have confidence at that point in time in your life that you were like, yeah, this is going to work out though?
I've always had a weird confidence. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's ego. It's audacious, but there's always been something there that I know my university friends, if they watch this, they'll always be like, we don't know why, but you won't. Because I remember from when I was 18, them saying, you have this confidence. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I really think things are funny. I have a sense of humor about this shit. I mean, I used to laugh at it. I laugh at it now. It's a little crazy to look at, but I think I have a pretty good sense of humor about it all. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. I think a sense of humor above all.
I think that's important because you got to keep your frame kind of positive when the world's taking a shit on you. And if it feels like in your situation there, a lot of dominoes all fell at kind of the same time. Like usually people can lean on a relationship being really good if business is going bad. Usually people can lean on the business doing well when you're having bad relationships or whatever other problems are occurring in your life. But it sounds like everything hit the shit at once.
It did, and I was going into debt more and more. And I think where that kind of went quickly from there was that Astro Screen Printing was the place that I was brokering all my stuff to. And out of this little store on College Street, I had sold $120,000 worth of screen printed merch my first year doing it. And they had gotten 60 of that. I made 60 grand just in brokering. And then I had my retail in the store making 20 or 30 grand. So, but the problem was I still was in debt because I had these multiple kiosks. Like I had like a, $1 million company that I had no idea what it was. And I was just going into debt with that and the kiosks and everything. So making 80, 90 grand clear, whatever, it was just like, oh, well, whatever, but it was just this weird time. And they offered me a job to come and run this big commercial print shop. And I took it because I didn't see myself as a 7-day-a-week owner-operator of a clothing store. That wasn't my life. I didn't want to, it worked. I remember when I was like 18 years old and finding out I could sell things and people start telling you what you should do with your life. And I remember just having this thing saying, a lot of people are going to tell you what you should do. 'Cause, like relationships, well, we're perfect for each other. We're going to be together. Yeah, no, it's not going to happen. Or you find professions or ways that you could succeed and you have a life. Like I always joked, I have short hair now, but I had long hair for 15 years. That if I really wanted to make a lot of money, I would just become a corporate sales guy and cut my hair because I think I have some acumen now over the years, but that's not what it is. It's about building this creative company and about building my own thing, but that was important, I think. And so I also wanted to play in bands. I wanted to play music. I wanted my weekends back. Weekends still to this day feel crazy to me because I did all those years of 7 days a week. Weekends are these amazing vacations at the end of the week now that I really love. But anyway, I took the job at Astro, and in and around there, I made a deal with my finances where I didn't go bankrupt, but I consolidated my debt. So I basically took a hit on my credit, made a deal with all my debtors, and out of stubbornness. So when you go bankrupt, they tell you that they're going to garnish your wages over $1,800 a month for a year.
Holy shit, I had no idea.
I think that was the deal. So the two options I had was consolidating my debt, which was like quite a bit, maybe let's say 80, 90, 100 grand, making a deal for 40 or 50 and paying that off at 40 or 50 for 7 years or something like that, where your credit is bruised and you're sort of a shadow of a citizen, but you can still now make whatever money you can make. So that was plan A, option A. Option B is they're going to take all your money over $1,800 a month for a year or 2 years even.
Holy shit.
So I'm like, no. Because see, I think the confidence too came from, I had hit a lot of home runs too. I mean, I had hit home runs. I played soccer regionally too. I was a pretty good goalie. I played tennis provincially too, and basketball. And, I don't know, maybe it's just in sports in high school, but there was a lot of things that I knew that I could do. And so maybe there was just this memory of those home runs or those hits or those wins all the time that kind of kept me going.
The $1,800 plus a month thing, I think about that a lot because I'd say the second you cap my upside, I'm not interested in playing that game.
Right.
The second you're like, hey, this is the limitation we're gonna put on you, and that's why to a certain extent, the normal kind of career path has never been interesting to me. Like working for someone else and saying like I can do whatever I want, but I'm gonna make $100,000 a year. And I mean, there's a lot of luxuries with like having weekends and having a normal life. But with the second you cap my upside on anything, I become extremely uninterested in it. So I understand why you chose the path you did.
I knew right away. And my wife, I think, says that it was noble of me because I didn't go completely down and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But for me, it was, no, I'm going to make money. And so when I went to Astro was a losing. They were doing $180,000 a year in sales, losing money. And I came in there and they did not give me a salary. And they said, we'll give you 10% on goods shipped, not goods paid for, just goods that we ship out the door. And I said, my goal is $500,000 the first year. So all I had done was 1 year of screen printing brokering from the store. And I said, I'm going to do 500,000. We did 530,000. The next year I said, I'm going to do $1 million. We did 1.1 million. The third year. But what happened was, and this was the deal that I made, that was their deal. I mean, so they were paying me 10% on goods shipped. So I would write an invoice, send it off to whatever. We were doing stuff for everybody. And they weren't getting paid. And they were still paying me. Now, this was their deal. And I was learning. I mean, I'm still a kid, even now. So at the time, I'm like, I'm just learning. They're paying me these checks. They're not getting paid. I have an ability to be everyone's best friend. But because I had that background with all my businesses, I can collect money. Like, it's always been something I can do. Not because I'm a bully or an asshole, but I'm happy to call you up and same look that your dad has, in the stories he tells. And just say, hey, man, what's going on? And so I said, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go after the money for you, but I want to raise. So they gave me 13% gross. So we did, 1.1 million or 1.2 million. So I made 130, 140 clear that second year. But they got paid on everything. So they were a bit happier. But the third year, they set up a company within the company to compete against their company because they didn't want to pay me commission. Instead of calling me and saying, do you want to make less money? Can we work something out? They set up a competing company against me, who was their main sales guy.
So is this the part where you strut off on your own? Also, can we crack this whiskey?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Do you want to do it? Go ahead. This is your gift. Okay. Yeah. And I'll tell you that's a fun story. But so basically, Peace and Cotton started around this time. They sent me on a trade show mission to California, Long Beach, California, and they said go and find out some stuff to bring back for us. And I said, there's all this stuff in LA that is not here, and we should bring it back. And they said, well, that's not a great idea. And I said, I think we should call it Peace and Cotton. And we should try this out. Should we try it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You like it?
For 45%, that is smooth.
It's smooth. And I got a funny story with that. So I come back and I say, Peace and Cotton. Because really quickly, I used to do corporate sales at the time too, and I was sending 200-300 emails out a day. And I realized that people were kind of assholes. And so I was dealing with Labatt, Molson, a lot of big clients. And they were it was faceless, and people were just kind of shitty. So my tag, which was Jer, or thanks Jeremy, whatever, Panda, became peace, and cotton, peace and cotton. And that was where Peace and Cotton came from. It was my tag at the end of emails because people, I didn't like how mundane and whatever. And so I'd always find these little games and things to amuse me. And so I said, let's do this. They said, it's a stupid name. And, but you can do it within our company. And I'm like, you sure? So we had two companies within the company that were pretty much conflicts of interest. And so I went to a lawyer And I was making good money. I was making clear over 100 grand, and I built my system. So the system was already there. So now I really only had to work 4 hours a day. It was all there. The sales cycle was working. So the lawyer, really good lawyer, small business lawyer, 30 years, whatever, said, this is what's going to happen. He says, this happens to everybody like you. Like Joe, okay, I'm not saying that I'm like this, but he said this at a lunch. He said, Joe Fresh, all these guys that end up being guys that have their own company and do all right, started off in this situation. So you have a couple choices. One is you can go back and you can volunteer 60 grand a year. And, you probably won't work that hard. The money's going to be halved. The company won't grow anymore, whatever. Or you just go back to work and you get fired eventually. And it'll probably be within a year or a year and a half. Well, I'm going to go get fired because you get a severance. And I was good at it. And if they came to me to talk to me, I would have talked. I'm always up for talking, but it wasn't the relationship that we had. They were getting mad at me.
You had that relationship established from what they previously did when they built an entity to compete with you within your own organization. So you knew they're not coming to talk to you.
No, and there was a lot of two-faced stuff going on, and there was a lot of bullshit going on. I had a reputation of being the asshole, but it was because I cared about their company, and they didn't show the urgency to get money, to get jobs done. If something went wrong, it wasn't my company, but it pained me to say that. Like now, years later, I can say it wasn't my company, but at the time, I took it personally. Like it was my company. I built it with them, but I was part of it for sure. So when I could go off on my own at that point, that was kind of when it all happened, which was, I guess that was 12 years ago when that really happened.
So you're like now late 20s?
Yeah, 28.
You're 28 and you get fired. So you get fired and now you're able to do your own thing, and you got the whole machine lubricated to a certain extent. Like how to do it. This is actually very similar to, I have a friend, Leo, who I'm going to try to get on here. He's a bit of an older guy, but he built one of the largest welding alloy companies in North America. Same thing, like worked on both sides, on the buying and on the selling side, inside welding alloy company, and then built like a massive business outside of it. Got sued extremely heavily for a non-compete early on that he still has the check framed in his office. But no, Leo's done extremely well for himself on kind of the same principles. So wow. That's funny. It's funny. It's a common thread here.
Well, that's the lawyer. Like we had lunch and all the stuff that he said came true. Not just with what I just said, but all sorts of stuff. Like there's just these things that happen, I think, in small business, medium-sized business, and you can almost count on them. So, so when I left, I didn't know what I was going to do. But a lot of my clients followed me. And when you're doing $1 million in sales and making 130 grand a year, when you go off on your own and you can make a margin of 30 to 50% as a broker or more, and you only need a quarter of those clients to follow you, and there's new clients that are going to come. So I really only had to do $250,000 a year to make 100 grand. So I didn't think it was going to be like that. But I basically, my next year, I was still in the same pay bracket, and I was doing a quarter of the work. So it was great. But what happened was, and this is where it led me to now, is as a broker and as someone just selling and not being able to cap over 250 with the way it was set up as a broker, I couldn't get the consistency on the product. So I liken it to people making lattes, because you see the guy who's trying to make the heart or the shape and it's shit. And you're like, did you just try to do something there? And then you see you guys or somebody, not that that's what you take pride in, but, and I don't have lattes with you guys, but you see the art, and you can see that just making a coffee obviously is different from one barista to another.
So you felt like in the like if you're getting shirts screen printed, you'd have one run that comes out for a client, they're super happy with it, it's awesome, and then the next run could be complete shit.
A one color print, a one color embroidery done by 5 different guys, there's a huge difference, like a massive difference. It's so noticeable. It's like the guys that take pride in the work, that have done it for years, the guys that can pay for their mistakes, those are the guys you got to work with. I wasn't good, though, as a broker because I'm very loyal, and I just want to work on the relationship. I'm like, let's work on it. You suck. You didn't do it. You're going to pay for it, but you're going to get it right. Oh, you didn't get it right again. Okay, let's just do it again. Come on. I got faith in you. I mean, I got faith in people, but it became clear that I needed to get back into the factory setting. I was always a hands-on broker. I'd be walking there and breathing down people's necks in a nice way. I was friends with all the operators. I mean, I love this trade. And but I think I really wanted to have my own thing. And so that's how it began.
That's how you started moving things internal then.
Yeah. And it started with a girl named Lauren. And Lauren was an intern out of George Brown who worked for me for a month as an intern. And I don't like unpaid interns. So after a month, I was like, I have to start paying you. And Instagram was just kind of getting going.
Okay. Yeah, like we're early days.
And she started the Instagram and helped around the office. And we went from my living room, which Aaron, when we were dating, like we would do like 4,000 Molson hats in the living room. And we'd have heat presses and be doing these like custom bands and stuff. And Aaron's just met me, my wife.
I mean, she was like supportive of all this at that time?
Yeah, my wife, I sometimes feel like I'm just her, she's a neuroscientist. I feel like I'm the subject sometimes. But no, she's very supportive.
That's
very
awesome.
Supportive.
That's huge. I think entrepreneurs often, you hear a lot of stories where relationships are a common thread that they struggle with, right? So yeah, finding someone where you're running Molson hats in your living room and them being like okay with the house being a factory is important.
Oh yeah, I was working out of the house, and I remember I would meet with people in the coffee shop down the road and be like, yeah, and have to be like, I have been in a factory, but I don't have one. And then Lauren and I got a little sales floor on Spadina. We moved 3 times the first year.
Shit.
And she built the company with me, and it was a really amazing journey. I would say we're friends. Lauren and I are friends, but I know that over the years I've been called a lot of things as the boss and very blindly kind of moving ahead. One of the staff once said, not to me, but I heard about this after. She said, we're on a boat and Jeremy's driving the boat and we're all hanging off the boat for dear life. He knows where he's going. He's good. The boat's moving, but we're all just hanging on for dear life. Now, that was 4 years ago. I take a lot of pride now in having a team where I pay benefits. We have benefits. I love them all. And even if they decide to leave, we have positions now that can be filled, but I don't want them to leave, and they know that. And we just have a really good relationship. It's really tight. Smaller team, too. It gets smaller and smaller, which is great. So
does that kind of bring us to present day then?
I would say so. I mean, a lot has happened over the last 3 or 4 years, but I think we've solidified as a company that, that does what we do in the last 3-4 years, and that's kind of where we're at. So,
and can you tell everyone your crazy story about a massive Lush PO that you pretty much secured because you're you?
well, Instagram is a huge component of this. So we got a $500 job on Earth Day, where we were doing 50 gray T-shirts with a one color print for Lush. First job with Lush, $500, $10 a shirt. It was an organic shirt. And the guy, Reggie, was a really nice guy. And he said, thanks a lot. We got it done in a week or whatever. And I was walking my dog, and I remember thinking, who's Lush? What does Lush do? And so I came back in the next morning. I had like 80% women staff at the time. And I said, tell me about Lush. And Lauren just shook her head as she did. And it's like, Jeremy, Lush is like a $300 million cosmetics company. They're massive. We need, you need to learn about Lush. I'm like, okay. She's like, most of the time, they do these product wraps that are like bandanas, printed fabric around soap. Of course, this is where my sort of divergent kind of mind goes and says, well, it's that's easy. That's what we do. We do bandanas. So I get back on the phone with Reggie like 2 days later, and like after sort of looking into it more, looking at the product, and Reggie's like, I'm like, yeah, by the way, we do this. We can do this, no problem. Like, this is totally in our skill set. So he says, I'm going to put you into contact with the senior buyer for Lush, or one of them, I guess. You can tell him that we played in bands together if you want. It was, and he said, that never came up, but I started talking to this person, and we were floating 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pieces, which is no big deal for us. And a couple months had to go by. I didn't expect much from it, but I did my job, and the PO was dropped, and it was 80,000 units. So it was a $400,000 deal.
Holy shit.
Now, just to give you perspective too from us, we did 474,000 the year before that. And then the next year we did like 880,000. The 880,000 had a $400,000 PO in it. The next year we did 980, but we didn't do a big PO again. So we really grew a whole lot anyway.
Yeah.
But that was a massive PO.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Were you on cloud 9 when that came through, or did you panic?
I didn't panic. I mean, it was I have a lot of competitive sport in my background. And I remember my doctor saying, I don't know if you've heard this before, but a lot of times if you've done any kind of athletics, your body can go into like a lower, like your heart rate will go down like lower, right? Than normal. I think I was in it kind of today. Like Aaron's like, you all right? Like, you're going to be all right today? I'm like, yeah. I get into kind of okay, because I'm pumped. I was pumped to come here. When I had a gig, when I used to play, like I never got nervous. I love playing music. I love being in front of people. But I would go into this kind of like meditative state. And yeah, you know what? You must know what I mean.
Get like zenned out. Yeah, to a certain, I think I know what you mean. Like when I was racing competitively, I'd say there was a bit of nerviness before the event, but I remember this almost like fucking bizarre tranquility that would come around like during a formation lap, and you're in a car going, whatever, 250, I don't know how many kilometers per hour, whatever you're doing, wherever you're racing at the time. And you're just like, you're so present. Like if someone were to pull you out in that moment, you wouldn't be able to tell them your name. Like you're just,
right.
You're there. But yeah, and everything's just very settled all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
Or at least it feels super settled. I'm not sure racing wise if your heart rate actually drops, but your brain is like settled. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I poker. I mean, I used to play a bit of poker too, and I poker faced it, and then it began, which was crazy. So it's about 12,000 meters of fabric, and so my main sewers that were going to take the bulk of the work, they were like, we can't do it. Like within a couple days, they were just like, we can't do it. I'm like, what do you mean we can't do it? I'm like, I'm going to pay you. I'm going to pay you deposits. You're going to be set for like 2 months. They're like, yeah, we can't do it the way that it's printed on the fabric, the foot of the sewing machine. Can't do it. So, and it was raining that day, and I sat in a parking lot, and I was like, I'm fucked. And then you just start to, figure it out.
Is that like, I always say, one thing that I wrote down when I was thinking about like my skill sets as an entrepreneur, and kind of one thing I've always been able to lean back on personally is like, I can figure shit out, like no matter what, I might not be good at a lot of things, but I can figure some shit out and make it work. So like, I feel like every entrepreneur has that like gritty, almost like cockroach survivability type vibe to them, where it's like you will figure it out. You will.
Totally.
You'll survive. You'll figure out how to make it.
It's the definable characteristic now of the company, because that was one of the first jobs like that where I had to figure it out. And most of the staff over the years would question me and say, why is Jeremy doing these crazy things? Why is he taking on these crazy jobs that we don't do? And it was because we had the opportunity to do it. And over the years, we did Game of Thrones. We worked Game of Thrones. We did this massive job for them. We've done 80, 90 events for Adidas. We've done so many of these jobs. And so now the company is defined by that. So a couple of the toxic people that were in my company that I had to get rid of over the last year or two, I was able to sit down and look them in the eye and say, this is what makes us. This is how I can afford to pay to have designers on my staff, because we are not just a screen printer, because we're not just an embroidery company, because we get paid by Adidas to figure things out. Like Adidas was like, we've got an event in 3 weeks. We are going to work with a fashion designer and we're going to remodel 300 pairs of pants to what this designer specs were with these existing Adidas pants. And we want you to do them. And you're charging them for them to go away. They're like, no, we're doing it with you. So you get the money and you do it and you get it done. And so Adidas knows that that's what we do. We figure it out. One time, one of the events for Tango League, we did a lot of Tango League, soccer league stuff. We cut jerseys up on site and put different jerseys, sewed them up to other jerseys and mismatched things, and then printed them with
that's awesome.
All rhinestone stuff and all sorts of crazy stuff. 2 weeks out, a week out. And so again, when you do it enough times, then you're like, no, this is it. So don't give me shit. Usually it was from my staff. Not anymore. They don't dare. They believe now, I think. And it's what I say to them. This is why we have benefits. This is why they can leave an hour early if they're done the work that's, every day. They can come in a little later. Whatever, just get the work done and let's not have anything come back. And if it does, obviously we got to relook at things. But yeah, so
what what are you thinking about going forward then? More of this? Do you find that when people introduce new products to you, if, for example, if Adidas says, hey, we want you to come and do this thing that you've never done before, do you find that is a good segue for you to say, is this where the market's going? Is this where I need to be investing? Is this where things are happening?
Yeah, I mean, it was, because it was the experiential side. And I know that it's not dead, so it'll come back. But what's crazy is working with all these brands over the years, thousands of brands, I've built up a bit of a cynicism towards brands. We call brands sometimes vanity projects. And they're very similar to what I've done in the music industry, is where every 3-4 years you get the bug and you want to go in the studio and record some tracks. Creating your own t-shirt line is kind of like the same shit as going into a studio and recording some tracks. No, you're going to buy 500 CDs for $500 and they're going to sit in your basement for the rest of your life. So, but I've always said about brands, when people come to me and they ask me what I think about them, is, Nike didn't just create a swoosh and put them on a shirt and sell them and they were cool. There was something behind that brand, to put it simply. And so where I'm going with this is Peace and Cotton's become a brand, which is ridiculous, because I'm anti-brand. I have lists of things, like somebody who calls himself a CEO when it's them and their dog. Yeah. In their yoga studio. I'm sorry. Maybe it's not yoga.
That kills me too.
It bothers me.
That's I was in CEO your Instagram bio.
I was CEO for 3 days. I said to myself, I'm going to be the CEO. I'm allowed to be a CEO more than these 15 people. 3 days later, I'm like, I'm not the CEO anymore. I can't do it. Read what a CEO is. It's someone who refers back to their board of directors at a table and comes back to them and reports to them. If it's you and your dog, there's no board of directors.
You're no CEO. CEO.
I'm kind of a no bullshit anti-brand kind of guy, and someone that facilitates brands. And all of a sudden, we now go direct into Holt Renfrew. We've done 7 products this year with them. Foot Locker, we did one rollout. We're doing this. We're signing a big deal right now with them. Reebok, we're now meeting with them directly. Lush, we're a direct client. All these universities that we've been doing with COVID, we're direct. It's Peace and Cotton. I don't want to just go direct. I love middlemen and brokers, and we're loyal, and Canada's small, so we're all good. But there is this sort of brand thing coming out of it. So where I'm going now is I'm developing products offshore and in Canada, some recycled snapbacks, some heavier kind of merino wool things, like, and kind of just for fun, but seeing what I can do there. And because I think people are they're kind of liking this sort of honest local brand that has got a resume now of products and offerings. But I'm very into the challenge. I'm kind of obsessed by it. I do like innovation and R&D and trying things out and figuring out things. So it'll probably be what keeps me awake at night, but it'll be what motivates me into my next decade of work.
That's it. Yeah, no, I feel like whenever you feel like you have something figured out, it becomes like extremely uninteresting to pursue it at that point, right? So yeah, new challenges, growing, moving on to new things is massively important. So with you guys, are you looking at doing piece and cotton, like actually having apparel? Like,
yeah, to some degree. I mean, now we've got a great logo, which Keegan is our new designer. It's come on in the last year, and he rebranded everything. It was sort of like a trial thing. I was like, hey, he was new, and I was like, hey, try this if you want, thinking there's no way in hell I'm going to use his logo. And I loved it. So he did a great job. And so we have this thing, and so we're putting it on things. People are buying sweaters with the logo on now, which is weird because I'm not even selling them. They're just DMing us, and I'm like, yeah, I guess if you want. So there's going to be like kind of a low, I guess it's got a little punk rock, but I'm developing all sorts of different types of products and sticking the logo on it. But
that's awesome.
We'll see. Man. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Okay, before I ask you like the last question and wrap it up, tell me the story about this okay. Woodford Reserve.
Okay, Woodford Reserve,
which is fantastic.
Yeah, so it's February. My best bud Pete. He was my best bud. All these friends have been taken by domesticity. So I don't know if they're my best friends anymore, but I love Pete.
Like they got married?
They got married and have kids like me.
Shit.
Okay. Oh, dude, that's what I say now.
That's a trap, right?
Well, it's, you just start loving your kids a lot more than your friends, and that's tragic, but you do. I mean, I love my 2-year-old. I'm like, yeah, I like you more than most of my buddies, but I do love them still. Anyway, so Pete calls me up, probably half-baked in February of a year, maybe a decade ago. And he calls me up and he says, he lives in a condo on King Street. It's like party central for us for like a decade. And he's like, condo Christmas trees. I'm like, what? He's like, condo Christmas trees, little Christmas trees to the condo community. I'm going to pay for it. You're going to figure it out. See you later. Hangs up the phone. We proceed to build what we call Toronto Trees at the time. We had a website. We bought, so lots happened in this little chapter, but I'll make it. It's good. It's a good one. So we bought 300 Christmas trees. We went out to Luxembourg and down in like the South Shore of Halifax and Sherbrooke, Quebec, and partied and had a lot of fun and met all these Christmas tree farmers. And we were like, no, we want the 3-foot trees. We want the 3-foot trees. And so we bought 300 of these trees for Toronto Trees. And my parents, who I love, we have a couple acres of land where I grew up. We're waiting for the truck to show up. This is a big lesson to learn, is pay attention to how big shipments are when you order something, because you don't know unless you read that invoice. So
sorry, you have 300 real 3-foot Christmas trees.
300. Coming. Now I'm thinking, because I'm not, that this is a cargo van and it's going to pull up to my parents' driveway. My dad's 78 this year. He's 68 maybe this time. And they're wonderful. And Pete and I are there, and it's the biggest transport truck that you've ever seen. It's, I don't even know, a 39 wheeler. There's 18, 24. Like, it's bigger than that. Pulls up at like 5 hours late, and I'm just like, and the guy gets his iPad, or not even an iPad out, I guess at the time, and he's like, I'm going to watch this movie. You guys are going to unload this truck kind of thing, right? Like, I'm not helping. Young guy. And me and Pete start hauling these from the truck out, and it's a full container of Christmas trees.
And they have
300.
Do they have that like burlap sack around the roots kind of thing or whatever? Holy shit. So
I think it's like 11 at night. My dad and my mom, I can see through the window. They're starting to put their coats on. I'm like, no. I go in, I'm like, Dad. In my mind, there's guilt. I'm just like, my dad, he's this brilliant retired nuclear physicist. My mom's this brilliant retired school teacher, artist, author. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. No. So anyway, they help, and I couldn't have told them not to. I mean, they just helped, and we bailed these trees. So long story short, we go to sell these trees. We don't know, because in February you can't do market research of how many trees. You know what? It wasn't even 300. I'm so sorry. It was like 600. Now that I think about it, because what happened was we ended up selling 200, which was good. We didn't know that. We bought 600. Pete was going to buy 1,200. We landed on 600. Sorry, numbers are
Toronto trees.
So we sold like 200 out, but we had like 400 trees left. So here's Woodford. So we go down to Queens Quay, the LCBO. We set up this red trailer outside of the LCBO illegally. We have an A-frame. I write on the A-frame in electrical tape, Xmas trees, $10. We're clearing them out because we're done. We lost money. Like, we're done. We're out. So Pete buys a bottle of Woodford Reserve. This was the good one. The Woodford Reserve, the $20 less one. And we're out there. I put on the trees, Xmas trees and moonshine, like just to get people's attention. I've got 2 trees. I'm running up and down by Queens Quay, like with trees. We're drinking heavily. Our buddy Andrew's going to come pick us up later. A cop comes up in the first like 15 minutes. I remember he just pulls up, and I'm there, and I'm looking down at him, and he looks up at me, and he looks at what we're doing, and he just keeps driving. And we were there for fucking 4 days.
You sold trees outside of the LCBO at Queens?
In Queens Quay, there's like a big thing on every thing saying $5,000 fine or legal whatever. The guy
fucking retailed trees on Queens Quay
for and we just cleared them, and we were hammered. And Woodford Reserve was
the go-to,
the shit.
That is the greatest.
That's one of them. Yeah,
you have to make a Toronto. You have to make a retro Toronto trees. Like merch line, it has to happen, and I want every piece of it when it happens.
Here's the best part of it. The next year, we're like, okay, we got this website up. It failed, but there's something in us, and there's people that are calling us back. And so we realize that we can buy trees from IKEA for $20 and sell them for $80 to $110.
So
delivery.
You found like a retail arbitrage.
We made like $2 or $3 grand clear cash, having fun. Me and Pete in my Jimmy, driving around selling $20 IKEA trees for $80.
Holy shit!
For like the next 2 years, I think we did it.
That's what. Some of those stories are the best. Like I remember, I found there was an arbitrage on buying people's old car batteries and flipping them, bringing them to scrap metal. So I remember one time I drove out to like Oakville and got, I forget how many, like marine batteries, because they were even worth more, for like $70, and I literally drove them down the street to a metal recycler and got like $300, and it was like
crazy.
Some of that small shit is like the greatest thing ever, because you're like, that's like the most like grassroots entrepreneurial shit ever. Like when you do weird shit like that, where you find like little arbitrages or flip shit, that's the best.
It's a good word. I will use that now. Arbitrage.
Yeah, that's just, you found a retail arbitrage. Yeah.
Another quick one there. Similar to that, you said Oakville. So I was working at the Oakville Beaver one year, just loading newspapers on at 6 a.m. And this couple would come in. All these people would come in that did circulation. And so we're loading on newspapers onto their trucks. And there's this big old camper van and this like 85-year-old dude and his wife, Mary and Bill. And they'd come in every morning, and we'd all like smoke cigarettes together or something. And I noticed that they were both wearing like brand New Balance shoes every day, different ones. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on? So a couple weeks go by, a month goes by, and I'm sitting in their trailer, find out Bill's like this. He went to jail for like breaking and entering, and then they took him out of jail later to like figure out this lock situation and evolve that industry or securities and whatever. And they're telling me all their life story, and I'm like, I gotta ask you, your fucking shoes, like you're wearing New Balance, like you guys seem like great people. I'm sure you do well, but you're wearing like brand New Balance shoes every day, different ones. So Mary's like, Jeremy, I like you, kid. I can tell you a secret. There's a New Balance factory down the road, and they got 2 dumpsters, and they ditch all their seconds in these 2 dumpsters.
So like something where the mold was off or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, like something tiny. and they stick a little hole in the front of the shoe, like right in the top. There's a little hole in all of them. But she's like, you can make a bit of money reselling these things. So what did I do for that summer? Dude, I made money, man. I sold them for like $20, $40 a pop.
So you just dumpster dove at New Balance a bit and
Constantly.
got all the shoes.
For weeks. Go back with my buddies. We were just selling them. My one buddy, Ivan, was like the only size 13 out of anybody that I knew. So I think he's still got like a dozen pairs of these. But yeah, anyway, that was the
dumpster edition New Balances. That's amazing. So last kind of question, which I'm sure will run into like multiple tangents, but if you could sit down and talk to the 25-year-old Jeremy, what would you tell him right now? If you could have a talk, maybe as long as the one we just had with him, what would you start with?
Well, I guess you get to do that when you have kids. I wanted to mention something. A lot of guys that watch this show, I'm sure, and girls, will know you and will know your dad. And often what I think with you guys is that you're kind of like when one of my kids grows up and just evolves every piece of work that I've and sweat that I put in over the years and takes it to a different level. Has a different perspective and can really just add a tremendous amount of value to the work. So I joke that my daughter's going to actually fire me when she gets to that age because she's like kind of a true alpha. And I have to be one sometimes with work, but I'm a softie. And, she probably would fire me, but she could probably build the company out to be a lot more, a lot bigger, if she wanted to. I don't think that answered it, but I don't know. The problem is I'm such a sucker for the pain. I love every minute of it. And I love going to bed thinking about the people that looked me in the eye and said, you're a failure. You're not going to do anything with your life. You're not taking science. You're not taking this. You're not taking that. And I just kind of did what I wanted to do and followed it.
Did that motivate you? Like that dark energy kind of vibe?
Yeah, it does. It does motivate me.
Like the chip on your shoulder. Like
there's a bit of a chip. I mean, and I think that chip came from, also it came from sticking up for people and seeing like racial stuff. That's a whole other tangent. But my dad being from India and me getting into trouble, there was a lot of stones thrown in my direction because of where I was from. Because I grew up in it was a very white town when we grew up. And I say that the stone thing because I think, people with darker skin than me growing up in a white town probably dealt with a lot less. I got into more trouble. So I think stones were thrown and they used that card. But there was a bit of a chip that got built up from that probably bridged into what I do and sort of the suffering. But I don't know. What do you tell them? I mean, I think to be thankful. I don't know. I mean, it's weird because people say don't burn bridges. I remember there was a client from Montreal, maybe last year, and it was like 4:00 and I had to pick up my kids. And she had just called kind of cold. We talked a bit, like a cold kind of call. She called me and she was really great and professional and old school. And then I'm like, I'm going to pick up my kids. So can we set up an appointment and talk like tomorrow or something? And it came up again like the next day or something where she said, you're very something happened where we couldn't do the job or whatever. And then she came at me a bit. And I remember her saying, you're very unprofessional. You said that, you're picking up your kids, And I said, do you have kids? And she said, yeah. And I go, so, do you think maybe like they would like you more? Like if you had actually spent time with them when, and we got into this thing. I don't pick fights all the time, but I don't know. I'm a bit of I'm a bit more emotional than your usual executive type CEO or guy
CEO.
running a company. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a bit more emotional. I always say I'm the emotional one in our household. I'm very much into how my staff and how the dynamic is and how people are and how they're thinking and how we can get their creativity out and how we can do things and motivate and inspire. So when you think about like Leonardo da Vinci and this quote that I remember saying, like, you have to be like a prism when you're a true artist, and you have to reflect off of every light, and every reflection that you make is, something else, and da 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 da. I that's something that's big for me, because I still identify myself a bit as a creative, and so it's hard to sort of think that anything was wrong. But I think letting my kids know that they're okay and they're good, and be empowered by the mistakes and the risks that they make and that they take is massive and huge. That was something I had to learn on my own. I learned these things on my own when I was 18, 19. I finally left the bubble. So if I can provide that to a younger version of me, I think that'll be good.
Yeah, to say you're gonna fail and that's part of this journey versus, I mean, if your dad came from a strictly academic background, right? Like, there's like you're 70 or 80% right? Like that's, or 90% right, probably in his case, right? So it's learning that you're gonna be like probably right like 10% of the time in entrepreneurship or whatever you're doing in life, especially if you're trying to be unique and carve your own path. You were saying earlier that your stepson is kind of the class clown. He's very much an individual, and you said you're trying to advise him to navigate that correctly, to not make his life, like, I guess, unnecessarily hard. Like, can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, I always say we're raising a household of individuals. My mother-in-law took a picture of us all once, all outside. We were all like by the badminton net. Erin was doing a handstand. She likes doing handstands and cartwheels whenever she can, like wherever she's going.
That's impressive.
If she can do a cartwheel or a handstand on the street, she will do it. And there's just this picture she took where all of our family was all doing there's a badminton net where it would show that some families would just be there playing badminton with each other. We were all looking off into another area, but we were all in this 10 square feet, but we were all doing our own thing. And she was like, "This is your family." And it's true. There's like, we're really encouraging of you being an individual. But with Julian, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. When I was 12, when I was his age, and my dad had been perfect, and my brother had been perfect. My brother was a double major, math, fine art at Waterloo in the Bill Gates era with the computer science scholarship. I mean, he's a smart guy. He is a smart guy. There's no motivation. What am I doing here? I wanted to be different. I wanted to be my own person. So it was like, well, that meant not doing the work or doing different kinds of work. I don't know. I just think that he doesn't have a motivation either. His Julian's father is an engineer. He's really smart. His mom's a neuroscientist. She's like, she got perfect in everything. Erin doesn't like telling me what her grade point average was. I like coax it out of her over wine. Like, come on, it was 99. No, it wasn't. I'm like, it was 98. It wasn't 98. Okay, it was 99. Like, so I always say to Erin, I'm like, my wife, like, well, what is his motivation? Why does it's not coming to him that easy. It wasn't coming to me easy. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. But again, third party. I can be this objective third party, the buddy, the solid dude that's going to like be there for him no matter what. He's already starting to talk about chasing girls and going out late and doing things. So I'm like, hey, man, I'm showing him what the Uber app is and saying, I have a lot of power. You take my number. You're stuck somewhere. I can move you from anywhere to anywhere. This is how you do it. You're not going to take your bike.
No,
he's like, I'm going to ride an hour and a half. Dude. I'm like, no, you're not. You're going to call me, even if you're your dad's, and I'm going to Uber you somewhere. Okay. So I'm like this little ghost in his life, hopefully, that's going to keep him a bit safe. But I'm also very much like the thing is I was sneaky as hell. So I remember with Julian coming into my life, I would just hear when he was like, I'm going to the washroom, and I'd hear him ghosting into the kitchen, climbing up onto the kitchen counter. I didn't even have to see him, standing up, going into the cookie thing at dinner. And I'm like, Julian, get off the kitchen counter. He's like, what? How do you know? I'm like, I did it. I did that. That was me. So I had to I'm trying to back off. I got to let him get away with some things because it's bad if you just keep getting caught by your stepdad. But I don't know, man. He's a great kid. I just want him to, I think that you really want your kids to just be like, it's so exciting to look at them and be like, especially if you're kind of happy with your life, to just be like, I can't wait till you're smarter than me, and faster than me, and stronger than me, and better than me, and all this. I mean, that's why you're there too, to change it out, to be better and more evolved. And it's an amazing thing to think about.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. I think we should wrap it on that, because I think that came full circle, because I think we kind of started there. So let's wrap it on that beautiful note about being a father. So Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We probably went close to like 2 hours here, so that's awesome. Thank you so much for the Woodford Reserve. I'm waiting for the Toronto Trees sweater. And yeah, thanks for everyone who hung on this journey, and I'll see you next time.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot, dude.